that he must be hanged, or the judge has to sign the order of his death. That never happened. He was rushed through into the gallows of hanging, and getting him not the killing, I would say, not execution. It was definitely a custodial killing. And there are a number of things that we need to understand, that he was the first revolutionary leader, like a Che Guevara and the many other. But the another peculiar thing about it, that after the demise of him and killing of him under the custodial Indian leadership of Indira Gandhi, there is two graves are still waiting after the 1984 until today. Many years has gone, almost like a 30, 35 years has gone. That two graves are waiting for his body, because they were so fearful, because he was so powerful leader, like a Gilani, that they never released his body, and unceremonially he was buried within the third jail, like a gulag of India in Delhi. They buried him into within the compound, because they know that if his body was released, it would be such a huge cry. And there is two bodies, one in his Terham, his ancestral, the graveyard. The other one is called a graveyard of the Shuhada in Srinagar. The two graves was digged for bringing his body. Until today, his body has not been received and has not been moved from the third jail into that. So that is a number of things that we don't know about it. He was hanged in 1984, and prelude to that, what people think that is actually there was no connectivity. There was a murder of a diplomat in England. Indian diplomat was murdered in England on 3rd of February. Mr. Tharar, and they think that he was, because he was the leader of JFK, which is the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front and Jammu Kashmir Plebiscite Front. They think that he was the one who ordered his execution in England, and that within the 7 or 8 days, on the 11th, he was hanged. And there was another thing, because Indira Gandhi was going through a quarter of crisis in her own government, and the election was coming, and she needed such a big standing ovation by hanging him, that to show that she is serious on our Kashmir issue, and she don't regard anything but just the power, and show the world that, and that's unfortunately, after that, she was not even seeing the election, she was also murdered. So these are the things that we need to remember, we need to glorify. I don't subscribe to certain ideology that Maqbool Bhatt have, but you and me, we are a human rights fighter. When we want to look at it, the statement made by Afia Siddiqui or Afia, the Afia Siddiqui in a jail, we look at it, that is a human rights abuse, that she was not offered a trial in America and she was abducted from. Exactly the same thing happened to the Maqbool Bhatt. We don't say that he was right and wrong in the separatist movement and how he was affiliation, but we said he was not given a fair trial, and his body after the demise should be returned. That is the essence of his remembering the great leader.
Yes, and also Salman, well over 36, 37 years later, many in Kashmir still view Maqbool Bhatt as Shaheed-e-Kashmir, as the first martyr of the Kashmiri cause, because obviously he had a vision for a united, independent Kashmir, but also at the same time, his love was for Kashmir, and also he had this larger-than-life presence in the Kashmiri consciousness movement. And I think this is the reason why we are having this discussion as to, we know that obviously certain viewpoints we agree with, we don't agree with. But at the end of the day, he was a personality whose first and last love was for Kashmir and nothing else.
100%. You are 100% correct when you say ideology can be anything, right and right. When you look at the Afia case, we do not know whether she pulled the trigger or she not. But she was not given a trial. She was not offered a until today. We fight for her. Here to Maqbool Bhatt, you're 100% right. He was very charismatic. He was a born leader. And when in 1938 he was born, he was only 11-year-old when he stood up to the Zimidar that there was a drought, and all the farmers were asked to lay down on a floor when the Maharaja Kabul passes by, and it was like a humiliation march. He refused it, and he said he is not going to lay down, and he pushed, and then Maharaja has to cancel his motorcade in front of the peasant, because he ordered all the peasant of the area to be laid down on a floor of this, the Terham area, that He was 11-year-old and he stood up. That time he was not a political leader. He stood up and he said, no, I'm not going to accept this type of draconian, the instruction, and I'm not going to lay down. And all the people who stood up with him. And from there where his political actualization happened. And at the tender age of 24, he crossed the border into Pakistan. He went to Peshawar where he done the journalism and English literature. Then he actually crossed between India and Pakistan 4 times. And every time he get caught, he was also implicated from his JKLF, the Ganga Airways in 1971, that he is the one who was a mastermind behind the hijacking of the plane. But, that is always the rumor. There was nothing was substantiated. He was very charismatic. He was very good looking. He was very, very spoken. And he stood up. He understood, yes, India and both Pakistan both claiming their right onto the Kashmir. But what he wanted, like me and you, we want the peace in Kashmir, regardless of how we arrive to there, whether it's through the referendum, whether it is the accession to Pakistan, India. We want the peace as a human rights activist. And I think he was from very early age. He was adamant that he wanted to see a peace. And then finally, he started the GFKLF, which is like a Nelson Mandela, when we see that nothing is happening, nothing is moving forward. He exactly the same thing. The Nelson Mandela took the arms, and he took the arms. In 1968, he actually dig 178-meter tunnel from the jail in the jail in Srinagar to escape, and he managed to escape second time or third time into Pakistan. Then he crossed back and he was caught. So he was a legendary leader, and he died too soon. And of course, until today, there are 2 graves are waiting for his body to be returned. It is a shame. Nobody knows about in South Africa. And, we try to bring the remains of our ancestors or the political leader from Europe. But nobody talk about a great leader like him. He is buried against the wishes of his family into the jail. And India is still fear that if his body is returned to his homeland, whether it is go to the one grave or another grave, that's beside the point. There will be a revolutionary leader. Maqbool Shahid died unceremonially, unconstitutionally, under the jurist of Indira Gandhi. She ordered him, and until today, that record is prevailed. Both of the High Court and Supreme Court of Srinagar and India, the court order never been signed by the judge because there was not enough evidence. It was a political murder.
Well, Salman, Jazakallah khairan so much for that and that update and for sharing what you have with us this morning. We do appreciate it. Keep up the good work and all the best to you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Every 60 seconds, a silent